So Ding is now using a strategy.
Whoa! Whoa! Is this a blunder? Is this a massive blunder, Jon Ludvig?
Oh, he can trade the rooks and the bishop is stuck in the corner. Gukesh is about to be the world champion.
Oh, he resigned.
We have a handshake.
New world champion.
Gukesh, 18-year-old from India. He is the 18th world chess champion. After a long match and a hard-fought battle in Singapore, history was made today. 18-year-old Gukesh is the 18th and youngest world chess champion in history. Welcome to the Take post-game show. Today, with world number one, Magnus Carlsen, here in the Take studio. And Magnus, we have your very first world championship trophy right here in the studio. And how are you feeling today with history being made?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's nice to be back in Norway. I've been here for a whole hour. And, it's good to be. It's good to be here in the studio instead of outside in the cold. Of course, this was something that was a bit unexpected. A lot of us thought that Gukesh was the favorite to win the match, but this was a game that it never really took off. Like, Gukesh was clearly fighting for the win, and I think he was doing an excellent job to keep the game alive. But it all happened very, very suddenly, and that I think is what he explained later as well. That he was a little bit on autopilot, expecting it to go to tie breaks, and all of a sudden you get this chance, and it's all over.
Yeah, and let's complete the incredible pundit trio with Levy Rossman, Gotham Chess, and Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. You guys, I'll start with you, Hikaru. How are you today after watching the drama in Singapore?
Yeah, I think today was one of the stranger games, certainly, because it was a game that felt very slow and boring. I think for at least the first 2 hours, we were all expecting the game to end in a draw, and then suddenly Ding played this A4 move, and after he played this, he was definitely worse. It still should have been a draw, but I always actually felt there was a decent chance that Gukesh was going to win the game. So it came as a surprise to see how suddenly it ended, but I felt that around the time that we saw this King F6, King E5 maneuver towards the end, with Ding getting so low on time, it didn't shock me perhaps as much as it shocked some other people who were watching the game.
And I will just add that for me, jaw was on the floor. I also mentally had completely prepared myself for a tiebreak tomorrow, and I saw that Gukesh was putting some pressure. A bunch of Ding's decisions in the game were confusing me, but it's been 2 weeks of that, so I was just sort of ready for the game to end in a draw. I sort of feel for Ding and like a lot of commiserations, and he's been very open with his struggles over the past year and even throughout this match, and it's been a very exciting match, Kaya. But I know that India is ready to explode, and they will. And I mean, you saw the reception for Ding for Gukesh rather after the victory, super special. But yeah, like I can't help but feel like something is missing. You know what I mean?
Okay, something missing, and yeah, Magnus. One thing is the way it happened on the board with a big blunder by Ding in the end there, but that we now have the youngest world champion in history. That history was made today. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, first of all, it's an incredible achievement. You can say all you will about Ding and the way that he played, but he actually did raise his level during this match, and yet for all we've said about how we probably did expect even more for Gukesh, it feels like he has had more. He's had very good moments. He has had some really weak ones as well, but he is overall, I think, deserved. And especially when we look at the way he got here. First, he was down in the feeder circuit, won the tournament in Chennai on demand to get here. Then he had an amazing performance in the candidates tournament. Played, I think, one of the better tournaments that we've seen in recent years. There had a great Olympiad, even though that wasn't part of the cycle. And so, like, the total of it is extremely impressive. even if this match and the way it ended was maybe not as convincing as people would have thought from the outset.
Yeah, I mean, Gukesh, he takes what he gets, right, guys? Like, he had a position with Black today. He had a nice opening idea, and he was just playing chess. That's his only job. And it's true. He was way down in the FIDE circuit, like Magnus said. He had to win in Chennai, and it was a stacked field, and he did that. He won the candidates, and that was one of the craziest final rounds ever. And he won the match. And he keeps finding a way to do it in the most dramatic way, by the way. Like, Gukesh did it, like, he had to wait in the final round of the candidates, and then here it was another final round game, and completely deserved. And now I just can't wait to see who his first challenger is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think also to jump in there as well, I think, when you look at it, you look at the FIDE circuit, he was down, but also in the candidates, it's easy to forget how he got off to a pretty good start, and then he had this horrific loss to Ali Reza when they got in this massive time scramble, and to keep it together and then win that critical game against Abasov and then Ali Reza at the very end of the candidates. Of course, I played and drew him in the final game. He really showed great composure, and then even in this match, it's easy to forget that he lost the first game, and being down 1-0 in the match, I mean, at 18 years old playing the World Championship, it can be very, very difficult to deal with. But he was just amazing. I mean, the way that he bounced back, the resilience he showed was just truly phenomenal. And I think it speaks to how strong and how great of a world champion he is.
Already, right? And let's hear from Gukesh what he said at the press conference after becoming the world champion.
Actually, when he played Rook F2, I didn't realize that. I mean, I was going to play Rook B3 almost. But then I saw that this bishop is actually getting trapped, and after King E1, I have King E5 in the pawn ending, which is just winning. I mean, when I realized that, it's probably the best moment of my life. My whole strategy for this match was to push as much as possible in every single game with both colors. And I mean, it wasn't working till the last moment, but it just takes one game for the strategy to pay off. So I was confident about my strategy, my approach, and yeah, I mean, at the very least, I was tiring him out. Yeah, so it was good that way, and since I won, yeah, I could say it was a good strategy. I mean, every chess player wants to experience this moment, and very few get the chance, and to be one of them is yeah, I mean, it can only yeah, I mean, I think the only way to explain is that I'm just living my dream. So obviously becoming the world champion doesn't mean that I'm the best player in the world. Obviously there's Magnus, so it's also a motivating factor that there is someone at a very, very high level, and something that will keep me doing the right things, working hard, and trying to reach the level of greatness that Magnus has achieved.
And how lucky we are to have Magnus Carlsen, world #1 here in the studio. Do you think Gukesh has potential to be one of the great in history?
I think he has certainly accomplished a lot of things that puts him on that path. I would say it's a little bit early to say. I think it's a really good thing for him that there's two years now until he has to defend his title, because I think if he was playing somebody like Fabi or Hikaru in this match and played the same way, he probably would have had a very difficult time. But when we're talking about what's going to happen in 2 years, he, like, winning this championship, I'm sure it's extremely motivating. So there is a very good chance that he is going to go on a great run of results now, maybe even establish himself as the #2 player in the world, and who knows, maybe in the not too distant future, #1. So yeah, that whole thing I think will be extremely interesting to see.
Hikaru, do you think in the near future or far future, Gukesh will overtake Magnus also on the rankings?
Well, I mean, I think first things first. Much like myself, Magnus is not super young anymore, so we're still not old, I would say. But for me, when I look at Gukesh, the fact is he's 18 years old, and it's really hard to believe that he's peaked at this point in time. It is possible, of course, hard to judge, but I think certainly. The future is very bright for him. I would say that in this match, I think it's pretty clear that most of us would think that he did not play at his absolute best in the match, and yet he still did win the match. He showed great resiliency. He was very tenacious at critical moments, and so it remains to be seen, but certainly after this win, I think his confidence should be through the roof. He is the new world champion. And I do think there's a good chance that he'll go on a big run here, because also one thing that I was a little bit critical of was I felt that when I heard the team of seconds who were working for him, I thought that the opening preparation was kind of lacking. But it's very easy to forget that in this match, especially when he played E4, the only opening that we saw was the French defense. And so in openings like, say, the Spanish or the Italian or some of the Sicilians, he probably has a lot of ideas that he didn't show yet. And so because of that, I think there's a good chance he will actually have some great results in the future. But I think it's a little bit too early to tell whether he'll pass Magnus. I mean, let's be real. Magnus is the greatest player, at least by ELO, in the history of the game, and I don't think that's by accident. But of course, if Gukesh keeps doing what he's been doing, we'll see.
And
I didn't lose ELO during this tournament, though.
Yeah, he did. He lost 7 rating points.
True.
I was gonna add that when Gukesh was born, Hikaru was already 2660. So that that just goes to show in perspective how old everybody here is. I'm not gonna say what my rating was. It was not that impressive. And look, this is kind of the looming question. It happens when a champion is not like actively defending the title, but all right. I mean, hey, like screw the circuit, just put Magnus in. Let's go. Heads up match, put it on the rooftop of some skyscraper, and there you have it. You know what I'm saying? Maybe people will be upset because Fabiano and Arjun are trying to win the circuit, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I'm looking forward to the narratives after, like in a couple of weeks, like who's going to be the next candidate cycle.
It's not going to be me.
All right, you heard it here.
What if the price is right?
Is there any chance, Magnus?
Some sponsors must be watching.
Let's no, I mean, let's talk about Gukesh and the match and so on. Like I'm not part of this circus anymore.
No. And when you mentioned it, Hikaru, another thing that was mentioned in the press conference was the team. And Gajewski we knew about, Wojtacek, maybe not that surprising, Hare Krishna, not that surprising, but Vincent Keimer and Jan-Christoph Duda was in Gukesh's team. Are you surprised, Magnus?
I didn't really think too much about it. I think it's natural that there were that Wojtacek was joining as well, and because they've worked together in the past, they both worked for Anand. They're Polish. They know each other really well. Vincent was probably the biggest surprise for me. I know that Vincent has very specific ideas about chess and openings. He has like they're quite unconventional. So it did make sense to have him, and I do feel that to Hikaru's point of when you see the team, that what he achieved in the opening was not that impressive. I actually thought they did a pretty good job. I felt that they had a lot of interesting ideas in the openings, both with white and black. Of course, with black, it's harder because you're not necessarily going to get the advantage, but they had that one idea in the English defense, in the English opening, where Gukesh actually got a very playable position, almost a better position from the opening. And with white, they had these incredible ideas like Rook E1 in that Grimfeld, which actually I feel like should have been Gukesh's best games. They came up with a couple ideas in the French as well. So overall, I think they did quite well. And you got to realize that this is a lot harder. This is becoming progressively harder for each year or each championship. It is so much more difficult now than it was even let's say back in 2016 when I played the match against Karekin. Like we were actually developing theory in the Italian, because the Italian at that point was a relatively new opening on top level. Before that, it was the opening that people played if they didn't want to prepare and didn't want to play the Real Lopez. And so we were actually able to advance theory quite a lot there. Now it's so much harder. Like, you could claim that there weren't actually like any really serious openings being played at all in this tournament, and that is because they are too analyzed. So they sort of have to jump a little bit everywhere, and I think they did. I think they actually did a really good job there.
Mm-hmm. Anything you guys want to add on the teams?
Well, I think what I would add is I would say the same thing that Magnus said, which is the only real surprise for me was seeing Vincent, who was part of the team. All the Polish guys, I'd already heard a lot of rumors over the last couple of months anyway, specifically about Duda, that they were part of the team. So Vincent was maybe the big surprise. I mean, I guess I would mostly, I think, agree with what Magnus says in general. I mean, I think they got positions where Gukesh could play, and it is true that the world is changing as far as preparation goes, because if you go back even 10 years ago, I feel like the chance to really surprise your opponent in the opening and potentially get a big advantage and or even just outright win, it was a lot higher than it is now. So maybe also, like, as I think about what I said before, with it not being as impressive, that the times are changing, and if you get positions that are playable, that's more important than the prep bomb where you get to play 20 moves and you just get a winning position. I mean, although I would argue some people like Fabiano are still incredibly good actually at finding some of those types of ideas.
And we also could see, like, to see how hard it is these days. Like, Ding played the French and apparently wasn't even well prepared for the French, and still he actually scored +1 with the French defense, and which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I'll just add that Vincent is well known for his readies, his knight f3s and his knight f3 e3, knight f3 g3. I like to look at Vincent Keimer games and try to think that one day, you know, I can beat people like that, and it kind of makes sense. We saw a bunch of readies. I was shocked at Jan Klimkowski. I've heard of him. He's a young Polish player. He's like 2,500. But actually, I'm curious for you guys, like if you have ever had sparring partners or anybody on a team that's, let's say, 17 years old and 2,500 FIDE. You know, it's not somebody you would encounter, let's say, in a top 10 classical round robin or a world championship match. But what is the benefit of Gukesh, you know, working with somebody like that who's kind of a young rising star? I guess I'll ask Magnus and then Hikaru.
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I've seen Klimkowski play on Chess.com. Like, I've seen him in Title Tuesdays. He seems like a pretty good player. I see Hikaru is checking that out right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you know, what he contributes in the match, I have no idea. I think they know that a lot better. Obviously, Gajewski knows all the Polish players, young and old, so I'm sure there was a specific purpose. But I gotta say, in terms of preparation, I feel like a lot of it had the Gajewski print. So I'm not sure what we saw in the match that you can specifically attribute to the others. Like, for me, it really felt like the Gajewski show in Gukesh's prep, but could be wrong.
Yeah, I think mostly for me, I assume there was some specific opening, or maybe it was just that he's a very tactile player. Maybe it's his style. There's something that they saw there in terms of why they were working with him. I mean, I've never done that before as far as like candidates go. So who knows what the reason is. I think I would agree with Magnus about the openings. It wasn't really clear who exactly was coming up with the ideas. For me, at least, I don't know Gajewski as well, because of course, I haven't had a match against Vishy or dealt with Gajewski as much, other than when he worked with Duda for the candidates in 2022. Whereas on the other side, I would say for Ding, to me, it was super obvious that really the only person who I would say was coming up with ideas, which was Richard Rapport from Hungary, because in at least 3 of the games, they were directly there were games that Rapport had played against people in competitions. So yeah, I think for Gukesh they did a good job of probably disguising it. But on Ding's side, I mean, it looked like it actually looked to me like a one-man show, literally just one man doing everything.
Yeah, it ended with a match win for Gukesh after many different openings. The openings in the match has been very exciting, and we've reached now Magnus's favorite moment. We're going to go through the most exciting moments in game 14. There was one clear, extremely exciting moment in the game, but stuff happened before the blunder as well. Magnus, and you are now in charge of the actual board. And you'll take the lead, Magnus.
Yeah, this means that I can go back and forth as much as
Exactly.
I want. So I think there were two schools of thought for what Ding was going to do in the match. One was that he was going to go for e4 and basically try and kill the game as much as possible, at least. Introduce as little risk as possible, or that he was going to go back to what worked for him in game 12, which was some sort of c4 knight f3 kind of setup, and where he would still sort of try and get a small advantage, but where you introduce a little bit more risk because it's less forcing. And I don't know about you guys, what were you surprised to see knight f3?
You want to go, Levy?
Yeah,
And then you have to click the phone as well, Magnus.
Yeah, I mean,
here.
look, e4, like, you know, maybe there was going to be an e4, but knight f3 made sense, right? Like he's simple. He won the last game. This time he goes knight f3. He plays d5 and g3, and okay, c5 maybe is some surprise that Gukesh chose such a forcing setup to get white to play d4. But I thought it's a perfect position for Ding. No, it's a 2-result type of opening.
Yeah, I mean, actually, there were two things. The first thing that I actually wanted to ask Magnus is, of course, I mean, you weren't playing the match, but generally when you've played the matches in the recent past, specifically against Nepo, I would say, he always played e4 on move 1, and that was the only opening he played until he was down in the match. And I was curious, do you think that the fact that you weren't playing this match, it says something about the players really feeling like they can just play chess against each other versus playing someone who they think is better in just like in specific openings? So it felt like with Nepo, he kept playing e4 every game, and I feel like that's because he thought he needed to keep prepping deeper and deeper in lines versus, say, playing d4 or playing c4 and just going all over the place. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but it's a big difference from your matches and the last two that we've seen where every opening under the sun was played.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've also generally kept it fairly risk-free with the white pieces, at least to some extent. Like mostly, I've tried not to let things go out of control, which they have at a couple of points, but generally not so much. And I do think as we see, we're seeing a bit of a different approach. Nepo was very much e4, very solid stuff. Like it is. The situation was the same in 2016 as it was in 2021. It's hard to get an advantage against the very best openings. The advantage of playing the Marshal as black is that in most of the lines, there are the forcing lines which are basically unplayable because they've been worked out, and in the other slower lines there are usually 2 or 3 decent solutions for black in every line, which means that you can sort of jump a little bit here and there without particularly fearing that you're going to get hit very hard a lot of times. So that was a bit of a practical choice for me, but also I think for him, because he felt like at least as long as the match was even, he could prod here and there and maybe get a slight chance somewhere. As you say, now the approach is very different. You have Gukesh coming up with rook e1, which just leads to a completely unclear position. I mean, I'm sure they've worked it out to something that's semi-safe, but it's much more kind of out there than what we've seen in the past. Ding playing the French defense, which honestly feels a bit a bit unthinkable, at least as something that's more than a one game surprise. So it is really very, very different than what we've seen in the past.
Should we go to the next moment you want to talk about, Mike?
Yeah, let's go. So we have knight f3, d5, g3. It's not a big surprise that Gukesh wants to go for something that's fairly forcing with the black pieces. It seems that with black he generally wants to force the game a little bit more than he does with white pieces, which is also not an uncommon strategy as in World Championships. So we have a reverse Grinfeld. Again, you can allow a reverse King's Indian by castling here, but really the only serious try for white is to do this. So e6. Yeah, here we have bishop c5, which is also a serious move. It was played by Pragnananda at some point against me. There's been some other games as well that they're trying to transpose to the Dubov Tarash, as they called it, which basically works pretty fine for black. If I remember correctly, I think Hikaru Dubov played it the first time against you in the Grand Prix and made a fairly standard draw there. So 97, it's an idea that we've seen in the Grunfeld defense. Basically, if you can imagine the same position without white having castled, then this is a theoretical line that was popular briefly, I think about 15 years ago, after which people stopped playing it because it's quite harmless in a number of ways. So it was a little bit of a surprising choice from Gukesh in the sense that while of course it leads to an objectively equal position like everything else, it doesn't feel like it really puts any pressure on Ding at all. It just feels like Ding can play very natural moves and never be worse. So it was a surprise. But I talked about some Arjun surprises in the past where he just surprises you and you wonder what he's actually hoping for, because it seems that he's just taking more risk than his opponent. And this was a little bit of the same. I don't know what you guys were thinking, but this was not an obvious choice to me.
Yeah, so I think what I would say is I was also very surprised by knight g7. I expected bishop c5 or knight f6. It feels like it's something that you play where it's easy, where white has no issues whatsoever. As long as white goes c4, it should be fine. I think it speaks maybe to the general approach they had, where they were just looking for a game. They figured that Ding is very shaky, and they aren't really all that worried. They just want to play chess, was my take. Because otherwise, I struggle to really see the reason behind this. I mean, maybe you're hoping that white won't go c4, but honestly, I mean, in basically all these sort of Catalan reverse Grunfeld type positions, you're going c4 at some point, unless you literally can't. So I think they just wanted to play chess, and I actually thought this was a very questionable decision overall, because I also think that for Ding, who is a little bit shaky, you would expect that you want something more complicated and dynamic. Like that English game, I know you can't get it, but it was dynamic. There was no clear-cut path forward for Ding. And in this case, once you go c4, it feels like the position plays itself.
Yeah, because there are ways that you can complicate the game very quickly against the knight f3 g3 setup. For instance, you can go knight c6 on move 2, basically force white to play a complicated position from the get-go. There's also knight d7 there, which is a bit more of an aggressive move. So this did seem to play into Ding's hands. Of course, he's surprised, which is the one good thing about it. But a little bit like Gukesh's last black game, he surprises Ding, but he doesn't make it difficult for him at all, really. So as you said, Hikaru, strategy is clearly that we want to play chess. But we've seen them in the match that Ding can play chess when he has a position that is fairly easy to play. And now it feels like his position is easy to play from the get-go, that he's castled, he has no weaknesses, he knows these Catalan sort of structures in and out. It's just a little bit too easy for him. So let's go ahead a couple of moves. This is all fairly logical. Knight c3, castles, knight b5. And this was a shocking moment to me. Because if you take the corresponding Grunfeld line where white has one tempo more, you usually play the move e5 or e4 in that with reversed colors, and that is the only way you can really try and play, is to leave the bishop in the center and to move the bishop even when you're even a tempo down. It seemed like really like ambition without ammunition. You're retaining the bishop. You're avoiding trades, but for what? White can play in any number of ways and never be worse. Like if you wanted to, Ding could trade queens, go bishop e3, and he's not going to lose that position. There's queen e2 is supernatural, a little bit better for white. Even when he did b3, which is a little bit soft, even there he can fight for an advantage. While in the case of e5, I understand that it's more forced and may lead to simplifications, but at least it feels straightforward and relatively safe for black. Bishop b6 just seems to give risk only to black.
Yeah, guys.
Oh, go ahead, Levy. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. My listen. My chess analysis is not at your level. I'm not going to jump in here and talk too many specifics. I will just sort of let the audience in on kind of the general thing to perceive here. This is I describe this as not a successful opening for Gukesh, and especially after the move bishop b6, as Magnus said. It just felt like the same exact thing that happened in the last game that Ding had with white. Gukesh goes for a slight opening surprise, but he plays into a position that is completely anti his style and completely pro Ding style. And if you go forward, Magnus, like one move on the board, here I was just fully expecting Ding to play even, okay, b3 is fine. I mean, fine. But even something like a queen e2, and the next few moves almost are on autopilot. You have the bishops on the long diagonals. The rooks are coming to the center. I don't know. I mean, this looked like, for me, it looked like a total Ding success. And then it totally spiraled out of control in the next, 10 moves. Is that a fair perception? Like, what happened here, guys?
Yeah, I mean, Ding having Gukesh having 7 very good players in his team, and this is where you end up with, in this situation, that's not particularly impressive. And I agree with the take fully. That this seems to be a Ding position through and through.
Yeah, I would also agree. I think that basically where Ding has struggled in the opening is like when he doesn't have obvious moves, and even if he's spending a lot of time, there really are in most of these cases 1 or 2 moves. Mostly, I was just shocked here after Bishop b6 to not see Queen e2. I thought after Queen e2, Rook d1, and Bishop e3. I mean, it's one-way traffic. Ding would have a great position and great chance to win the game. And I think once I saw b3 on the board, that's when I kind of realized that Ding. It's like, I don't know how to explain this, but like old Ding, new Ding, whatever it is, somehow he was again happy to sort of just play very solid and not try for more.
But it's not like Queen e2 is not solid. That's the thing. I mean, of course, it's easy for us to say, sitting here, knowing that Queen e2 is a good move. Even on depth, the engines don't equalize for black completely. So it's just a position that is a complete success for white from the opening. I'm sure there are some concrete lines that go with a6, rook d1, queen moves, knight comes to d4, and so on. But you know, you kind of make an effort to try and make this move work. Yeah, I understand that Ding spent 10 minutes, which for him isn't that much, but yeah, this was a bit odd. But let's move a couple of moves ahead. The next move, while not forced, are very logical, and we get this critical position. And this one, you know, this is not the move of a confident player. Levy, you've talked about this before, that Ding plays into these situations where he plays sort of ambitiously in the opening, and then he just plays for a draw. And this is the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard for me, right? Because I don't want to. I know it's like popular in sports television as a person that's like not played at a professional level to sit and like yell at the players and criticize them and whatever. But in chess, we also have a computer that can tell us objectively what the best decision was. So, but I can tell you, like, c takes b5. I don't know. I would just like never. And then, you know, to follow up with knight f4. I mean, these are moves that don't even occur to me. Like, even if they're not the best moves, it's just, I don't know. Why would I destabilize my knight and try to trade all the pieces? You know, b5 is not winning for black. It's just potentially on the road to equalizing. So, Hikaru, when you saw CB knight f4, what went through your head? I know you've got more feedback in the future, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, it's one of those situations where I just don't know what was going through Ding's head. I feel like he came to the game and he wanted to play a game, and at some point he's like, he reverts back to this mode of effectively thinking that he's an inferior player and he has to make a draw at all costs. I mean, that's really all that I can think of, because it just makes no sense whatsoever. You can trade the bishop on d4, you can go rook e1. I know that black is fine in that long line with queen d6, f4, f6, and takes, but there's still no risk at all. And so then to take and play knight f4 is just completely illogical on one hand. On the other hand, I don't necessarily hate that, because it should lead to something where you're going to draw the game within the next like 10 or 15 moves, and you're not going to be at the board for more than half an hour. That's what should happen when you make this decision.
Yeah, and we'd probably be having a different conversation if Ding had made a draw in this game. So these moves b3, cb5, knight f4, and so on, they're extremely sort of negative decisions, but it's not necessarily that bad for the match situation. But it's a start of, honestly, a pretty shocking spiral. And this, we got to say, this can only happen in certain match situations that you even look at these moves because of this situation. Like, otherwise you wouldn't, unless you specifically feel that a draw is a good result. You'd never even think of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was going to say that, like, it's like if it's the end of the tournament and a draw guarantees first place or a win in a match or something specific, you actually would consider it. But otherwise, it's just not. It's never on your radar. It's not what you're thinking about at all.
It's got to be said though that we talked about Gukesh's play in this game and that his approach hasn't been all that successful. But I think from the moment that he played bishop b6, from there on, he really didn't put a foot wrong. I think he did an excellent job in pressuring Ding, exploiting the opportunities that he was given. And even though, as we will see, there are a lot of things that Ding could have done differently, Gukesh really made the most of his chances. Okay, let's continue a couple of moves. So we got trades, rook b8, rook fd1. This is all very normal. So this is the first, I would say, mild shock that we have. Your explicit quite explicit goal here is to make a draw. You made that perfectly clear with CB5 and knight f4 that I don't really care if I might be slightly better. I don't feel great about this. I'm trying to make a draw. And now you can force more trades. You can basically take out whatever little imbalance there is left in the position with a bishop trade. And it's almost unfathomable that in this state of mind, Ding didn't choose to trade bishops. And I think it just speaks to nerves, because there is no other explanation for why you would not trade the bishops here. He cannot possibly have thought that he was better.
Well, I mean, I was going to say that I was wondering for a split second he thought he was better when he played bishop f3, because, yeah, bishop d7 or bishop d5, both moves, there's just nothing left in the position at all, just literally nothing left. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's nerves, but again, I also feel like when you play c takes b5 with knight f4, you are trying to force a draw. And I know from my experience, because there are moments when I have gone for some of these sort of exchanges and positions, like when you're set on the draw, you just make the draw. That's it. There's no second thought. You just guarantee that the game ends as quickly as possible. So yeah, maybe it's the mindset, maybe it's something else, but it was very weird to see bishop f3. I was really shocked by that.
Yeah, I will echo that sentiment completely, Hikaru. And this is something that Peter Heine, my coach, told me like many years ago. Like, if you're trying to make a draw, force it. Don't get into a position which you think you're okay, it's equal, which you think you can hold. No, be super cynical and just sweep the pieces off the board as quickly as you can. And this whole half measure of going for these exchanges and then going back thinking, maybe I'm slightly better, I don't have to trade immediately. It is a recipe for pain at first and then potential disaster later.
But we were just getting started, because a few moves later, a4 was played.
Yeah, so you go for this move, bishop f3, and then b4. Well, there are two schools of thought, right? First, the b pawn is holding down two white pawns, so the two white pawns aren't really that much more valuable. The other one is that, well, the b4 pawn is not protected. If you could somehow win it, we'd have two passed pawns and win the game. So, let's try and put our rooks in the center. We're slightly better developed, and we can always exchange later. But here, Ding clearly had enough and decided that it was time. None of this keeping the pieces on the board nonsense. I'm gonna trade them after all. And he made, again, we could sit here after he made a draw saying that this was a professional decision and that he was not worried about getting a pawn down position which he can hold. But the truth is, he is just making things more difficult for himself here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when I saw a4, I was really just completely shocked. This move goes from a situation where I feel like with white, you can play a couple of moves and hope for a mistake from Gukesh playing with black. And if that happens, maybe you got some pull and you can sort of try to torture your opponent in a long end game. Whereas after a4, it's the exact opposite. If you play perfectly, you'll just draw the game. But if you get sloppy and careless, you can lose the game. You go from a 2-result game in your favor where you could win with a mistake or it's a draw to where it's a draw. Or if you blunder, you lose the game. And this is a move that I thought this was like unconscionable for me. It's a move that I would never even consider in a game. I thought queen d4, queen e5, rook d4, if you're really concerned, just bishop d5 even. But a4 is a move that it feels like one of those moves that, like, honestly, if I were playing Stockfish, you could play it against me and laugh at me and just defend perfectly and draw. But like in a human game, I would hate to have it. And I actually said when I was live streaming this, I thought that once you go into this position where you're going to trade the b and the a pawns and then eventually lose the pawn on b3, that if I were playing you, Magnus, I mean, I think probably I draw like 80, 85% of the time, but I probably lose it like 15 to 20% of the time. And to me, like, why on earth would you ever put yourself in a situation where you can lose when with any other move, it's basically, it's a draw or you win. It's just, to me, I could not understand the rationale.
Yeah, because you've had those end games in Title Tuesday against Andrekin, where it's like 5 against 4, 4 against 3 on the king side, which he always goes into. And I don't know the stats, but it seems that like he just presses. He doesn't really do anything, but once in a while, you know, you will win. Okay, let's go forward here, because we have a couple of moves. G6, of course, making air for the king is super logical. Queen d4, a logical try from Ding. And I think here we have an excellent decision from Gukesh. It would have been super easy to just trade the queens, take the pawn, and take your moral victory in the rook endgame, but the reality is that white would trade the bishops, and even with 2 rooks on the board, if black could somehow activate his rooks, we might have some minor chances, but that is not going to happen. You are constantly going to be threatening black with the trade of 1 rook, after which there is no life left in the position. White is just too active. So we can say there that with 99% certainty that Ding would have made an easy draw. And after the move Queen b5, no, the move b4 isn't forced. It is not even clear what Gukesh's next move is, but Ding is down on time as always. He's a bit nervous. He's trying to force it, and with the move b4, at least he can see a position where he feels that with good play he should always hold. So he's made a couple of negative decisions. This is another one, but I would say this one was much less egregious than the other ones.
Yeah, I think at this point he just wants to go into the end game, and he hopes he can draw it. I mean, I think when he plays a4, he's already resigning himself to forcing one of these end games. But still, I mean, to me, it seems kind of weird to not play something like a king g2 or like a queen f4 or something like versus just like playing b4, where you're going to end up in this rook and bishop endgame where I know it's a draw, but again, like when I saw this, I was very, very worried because there was no clear path to forcing any more exchanges. But it's what he chose to do.
Well, we'll get to that later. So obviously now if Ding had gone for the move bishop d5 here, his rooks are a little bit less active, and the bishop can easier move away. So the trades would not be forced in the same way. So Ding goes for the rook trade, which does alleviate a little bit of the pressure, but not all of it. G5 from Gukesh is good, even though I probably, in his shoes, would have slightly preferred a different move, like rook b5, preventing the trade of bishops on d5, something like this, because it's far from clear if Ding actually wants to play f4, because it weakens certain files a little bit. Then you can see situations where black plays h5, h4, and the pawn on f4 might be weak, and generally you want to give, in these drawn positions, like you want to give your opponents as many choices as possible. But still, this is sort of nitpicking. So this is all normal. Yeah. So this is a big moment in the game as well. And I mean, I know you were live streaming, Hikaru. What did you think here? Were you shocked that Ding didn't go for g4 here?
I wasn't super shocked that he didn't play, because at this point I felt like he was so passive and he's trying to defend this position at all costs that g4 feels like an active move. But that being said, I probably would have played it in a game if I had the white piece, just because I actually thought that around the time we reached this endgame with the rook and the bishop on the board, this whole idea of h5, king h6, g4, king g5 was very, very serious. And g4 really does stop that. So I probably would have played it. On the other hand, to be fair, like let's just say I were playing this game and I reached this moment, I played the same moves Ding has. I think it's very hard to play that move because you've sort of resigned yourself to setup and you're just going to sit on the position, which is why I think he did it. But it did surprise me, at least watching the game from the outside.
Yeah, it's quite possible that Ding didn't think there were any real ideas for Gukesh, and he could just sit there. But I think in these situations, like if you can force some more trades that are not bad for you in this situation. I know that Hammer was mentioning it on the live show as well. Like G4 gives you the possibility of playing F4. If you can do that, there are fewer pawns. It feels, it feels a bit easier, and at least you don't have to just sit and wait for forever, which. Because it's drawish, but it's not a complete draw. Like there are, as you mentioned, you advance the pawns. Like this can get very, very unpleasant. Like this is not your typical draw without using a single brain cell that he had in the previous game, which was also a 3 against 2. But here the addition of a bishop and a slightly more difficult pawn structure with the pawn on f2 instead of h2, which I think is slightly more dangerous. Maybe not with the bishops, but in general, it is not a dead draw. So yeah, ensuring some more trades would be good.
I don't know if there's much. Obviously, there's a lot of specifics. We can analyze the end game and all the different ways to play it. But I think Gukesh just kept the game going. He played relatively fast compared to Ding guys, and if you'd like to dive into some of this, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think for me, when I think about it, I don't know if there are any questions asked at the press conference about the game itself. And most of them were just about congratulating Gukesh, but certainly my feeling is he had to have known that he was probably a little bit worse. Nothing serious, but he probably had to have known out of the opening phase of the game. And so then when you get to this spot where you can you have an hour on the clock, basically, you can just relax, you can take all your time, no risk. It's just such a dream scenario to be in. And that's all you can ask for. You always want a game that's one way. That's always the best possible outcome. So I was really just, at this point, I just felt like Ding is going to sit and he's just going to hope that something bad doesn't happen. But between the position, between the clock playing a role later on, I already thought from a practical standpoint there was a very, very good chance that Gukesh would go on to win here.
And this is, of course, you got to give kudos to FIDE. Like this is the reason why they've decreased time controls after move 40 to make it just a little bit harder to hold these positions. And of course, as soon as time plays a factor here, even though Ding has played well with little time, it becomes all the more difficult. So let's move a bit forward. Ding just plays passively, doesn't do anything wrong, and Gukesh goes. He goes fairly quickly for this plan, which he didn't necessarily need to, but it's all fairly logical. And now, this was, I think, a little bit of a hasty decision by Ding. Again, typically something you do with a lot of nerves, because this trade is far from obvious. I think it would be nice, to have the option of potentially going f4 later on. It just introduces a little bit more of a challenge on the black position. Of course, if you feel like you can hold, that's all good. But Ding played this move in about 20 seconds, which I think was not a great sign.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at the time I didn't realize it, how dangerous it could become, but certainly it is true that when you trade the pawns on G4, and Gukesh did mention this in the press conference, if black can get the king to E3 and the rooks come off the board, it most likely is just winning. So it adds another situation in this endgame where you can lose quite easily, and certainly, I thought it was he played it way too quickly, especially considering his time usage a couple moves later on. But I think he was just on complete autopilot. And I mean, it's weird to say this, but I think he thought it was just an easy draw. I think he thought that he could just do anything and draw. But that's definitely not the case. Definitely not the case.
Okay.
And then it was the moment. Actually, here. Magnus team member, Laurent Fressinet, made a post where he put a rook on f4 in a classical game once, and I think he had the black pieces. I can't remember. It was, I think he was black, and his opponent put the rook on f4 and drew the game. Magnus, I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but then 3 moves later it was rook f2. So
yeah. So let's just again compare this to a rook endgame. A rook endgame here would be a dead draw. Like you could even allow the black king to go down to e3, and then you can, for instance, defend with a rook on f4, and you just have a pretty ironclad fortress there. But with the bishops on the board, that introduces a little bit more, and specifically the idea of the black bishop landing on e4 at some point and creating a pass pawn. It's genuinely quite dangerous. And I was playing around here, looking at certain moves with the engine. It's at this point it's surprisingly easy to drift into a position where you may only have 1 or 2 moves that save the position, and that's really what you want when you're on the better side in these situations. You just want to get 1 point or 2 points where your opponent has to make an only move, and if you can manage to pose those problems, maybe your opponent will make a mistake, but you just got to try and make the margin a little bit closer. Yeah, of course, this all is normal again. Ding puts his bishop as far away from the action as possible, which normally is something that is quite safe. But of course, in this game, it turned out to be really, really bad for him. And yeah, here we do have the moment. Ding has plenty of time still on the clock, I would say, almost 10 minutes. And instead he rushes, and within 10 seconds he makes, I don't know about you guys, but one of the worst blunders or one of the most consequential and bad blunders we've seen in a world championship. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Like, what would you say are the odds at this point?
Okay, so I guess I'll start. I mean, the first thing is, like, it feels me when Ding goes rook f4, he's completely losing the thread, because it feels like he's been waiting around all day. He's been putting the rook on, on the 4th rank, moving the bishop, or like rook b4, rook b6. Like, he has a clear-cut plan, it feels like. And then he spent quite a bit of time, I don't know if it's on rook f4 or on bishop a8, but he spent like 5 or 6 minutes, which did take him below the 10-minute mark, or right around there. And I had this feeling something bad was going to happen. I had the feeling. I think already, even before rook f2, I would say, if you ask me to give like odds on this position, I think probably already I would say 50-50 between a draw and a Gukesh win, if not even higher for a win than a draw. So it didn't super surprise me. I would also say putting the bishop in the corner on 8. I feel like I've had some games, even online or over the board. Anytime you put that bishop at the very edge where you only have one diagonal, bad things seem to happen from my personal experience. So I had the feeling that he was going to lose at this point. That was just my take.
Me too. I was actually going to say 50-50, but I thought it would happen that his time would get low, and then at some moment, maybe Gukesh would get the bishops off the right way, and then somehow he would break through, and maybe it would be a draw down to the wire, but somehow Ding would have 30 seconds on the clock, and Gukesh would have 45 minutes or whatever, and yeah, then he played Rook F2, which, like Hikaru, like you said, maybe he just thought the bishop was on B7 and could continue moving. Like maybe it's not a forced bishop trade in the corner. Maybe he blundered the king and pawn endgame. The fact that if he plays king E1 after the trade, there is king E5, and even there, Gukesh has to be precise. I don't know what happened, but let's put it this way. Before the match, like I wanted Gukesh to win and I wanted him to make history, not because I have anything against Ding, but just as a spectator, I was like, it would be amazing if Gukesh won. He had this incredible run at the candidates. He's the youngest ever. It's a new, and he's also he's like a gentleman. He's great in interviews. He like says all the right things. But when Rook F2 happened, I couldn't help but stare at my screen and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is how he's going to do it. And I mean, he still won. It doesn't matter. But like I said in the beginning, I'm like, that was just so unexpected. I'm still like recovering a little bit. I'm very happy for Gukesh, but I don't know. I'm still just shocked.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what really is disappointing about it is it feels like it's just blunders led to this. It's like, I don't know, like to use an example, I'll use your game, Magnus, against Nepo, the great game number 6, which you won. It felt like, I mean, I know the computer said it's always a draw until the end, but you kept improving the position. It didn't feel like Nepo just blundered. It felt like you had to keep improving. You had to outplay him until the very end. And with this one, it feels like Gukesh improved the position, and then we just get a straight up blunder, which ends the match on the spot. And so it feels kind of like something is missing at the end of the day. And I think for me, that's what I find disappointing. Is like it is a world championship match, but it almost feels like we just got this blunder and we didn't really see Gukesh have to earn it in this final game, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree that Gukesh, like I said earlier, I think Gukesh did really, really well for ever since the opening in this match. He did all the right things, but clearly he hadn't done enough at this point. Like it is still a position that even though we all, I think, felt that there was a significant chance that that Ding would lose the game at this point, because this is a position that you cannot really win. You can only lose it. That the critical moment was still far ahead, kind of. Ding still had 10 minutes, and he had plenty of opportunity to figure out a defensive setup, because Black really only has one idea, which is to bring the bishop around to e4 and then use that to infiltrate with the king. And this means that Ding cannot play completely passively as he had done previously. But when there is only one proper idea for your opponent, that gives you a little bit of a target for how to defend. And I don't know, this move Rook F2 is kind of a nothing move, because it doesn't try to improve his position or anything. It just, well, I gotta make a move, so I'll offer a rook trade. That seems reasonable, you know. With the rooks off the board, it should be an easy draw, and then it just loses the game. Like, it was extremely anticlimactic. Of course, the moment of Gukesh sitting there at the board in tears, that was beautiful. But the chess part of it was really not.
Yeah, it was the next move here on the board. If Magnus pushes, that was the massive blunder, the horrible blunder for Ding. Big reactions all over the world. What was your reactions? Like, how did you actually look? You were on a plane, Magnus, when you saw this. How did you react?
Yeah, I think it was kind of similar for all of us. As Levy said, like, it's like, really?
Yeah.
This is it? It's just... Yeah, it is... I mean, you'd expect, like, these mistakes happen in tournaments once in a while. It happened in my first World Championship against Anand, where I was somewhat pressing as black, and then all of a sudden, like the game was always drawn, and then all of a sudden in a rook endgame, I got a winning position and I won the game, and everybody was like, well, that was weird, because I think I had like 2 hours on the clock, so a little bit corresponding to what Gukesh had here, but we've talked about this before, but this was honestly, like, this was not the way anybody would want this epic match to end, because it was really the definition of an unforced error.
Yeah. I can show you the reaction that we had here in the studio. So obviously a lot of screaming, what just happened, the bar jumped up, and we look at Björn. That's our video editor in the background. I feel that's very descriptive of the world when this happened. Just simply jaw-dropping, that blunder when it happened, because it was the decisive moment in the World Championship match as well. But the place where the reactions, of course, were the biggest was in India. Let's take a look at what happened in the Chess Base India studio when this blunder happened and Gukesh became the world champion.
Pause, yeah. Rook F2 of what? What? Oh my god!
He's crying! He's crying there! He's genuinely crying! Oh my god! Don't cry, it's okay. No, don't cry. Cry. Thank you.
Amazing to see Gukesh's, the world champion's, reaction to winning. And we are also joined by Sagar Shah, founder of Chess Base India. Congratulations on a massive day, Sagar. And I think we need to get the sound for you, Sagar. But tell us, how are you right now after seeing Gukesh, someone you've followed his whole career since he was just a young child, become the world champion? And I don't think we have sound from you, Sagar. All right. While we try to fix Sagar's sound, let's hear from you guys. And Hikaru, I want to hear from you as well. You were live streaming this. Your reaction to that moment. One thing is the blunder for Ding and heartbreak for Ding. But for Gukesh, envisioning what this is like for him in that moment, becoming the world chess champion.
Yeah, I think certainly it's a very special moment. Obviously, it's something that everybody dreams of when you start playing chess at all levels, all the way up to the professional level. So I think it's very special. It's great to see the emotion. Having seen Gukesh play in the Canadas, having seen the whole run up to this, he's a very humble person, someone who I think speaks very eloquently. And when you hear about, the sacrifices his family made, seeing his dad who was there waiting for him after the game ended, it's really special. And obviously becoming the youngest world champion in history at 18 is sort of just like, the cherry on top of the cake. So I think I got the phrase wrong. But anyway, I would say that certainly really nice to see. And sort of it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. And it's great for India. It's great for Sagar. It's great, I think, for someone like Vishy also, to see what has happened with chess in India. It's just been amazing over the last 10 to 15 years.
Definitely. And now we have sound on Sagar. So Sagar, again, congratulations. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the entire Take team, Magnus, Levy, and Hikaru, for these amazing recaps, because of which the World Championship was followed so well, thanks to these recaps. So thank you, guys.
There is a fantastic video, Sagar. You interviewed Gukesh when he was only 6 or 7 years old, I think, where he says, my dream is to become the world champion. And here he is at 18 years old, becoming the world champion. Have you talked to Gukesh today?
We got him on stream, and he just waved and he was so happy. He was going for dinner, and we said we will talk later. I think it's just like when you interview any young kid, they say that they want to become the world champion or achieve something like this. So when he was 11 years old and became the under 11 national champion of India, I just asked him this question and he said, I want to become the youngest world champion. And I didn't pay any attention to it at that point, but then as it started to get real, when he won the candidates and now this happened, it has become like a very memorable video.
Fantastic. And Sagar, we've seen images from the very cool broadcast that Chess India has been doing for the World Championship match with spectators in your studio cheering, jumping up and down when there's big moments. And what does it mean for India to now have the world champion? And what do you see for the future now?
I don't know what will happen next. I think there'll be more opportunities coming up, more tournaments happening, more people who will take up to chess, more youngsters who will play chess. So I think it'll be a very positive environment for chess. But right now, I think everyone is just so happy. Everyone's celebrating. I can understand that the blunder at the end was a little anticlimactic, but it's just a huge moment for Indian chess.
Oh, definitely. How will this be celebrated, Sagar?
I think in India, when Gukesh comes back to Chennai, you can expect like thousands of people at the airport. Um, and from there you never know, like when the Olympiad team won, the prime minister invited both the teams. They spent he spent 1.5 hours with them. So I don't know what will happen next, but I'm sure that this will Gukesh, once he comes back home, there'll be a lot of celebrations.
Fantastic, Sagar. We're not going to steal more of your time. Go celebrate, enjoy this
Yes.
evening. Thank you for joining us, and congratulations.
And I just want
again.
to add one small thing, that we had several strong players on our broadcast, including today Vidit, and everyone said, like, they are following the take recap. So
Yay.
because there's so much to gain, so many insights, especially with Magnus so passionately recapping many of the things. So thank you.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Celebrate. It reminds me, Magnus, of when you became world champion. The whole of Norway was celebrating. I feel kind of jealous of India. They now get to celebrate like crazy this moment. How big is this for chess?
Yeah, it's obviously a massive moment for India, and as was mentioned earlier, it's kind of the in a way it's the culmination of the work that has been done there. But I think it's far from over. There are certainly many more successes to come, and honestly, it's heartwarming to see how much it means to it means to Gukesh for Gukesh to win. It's I don't think I ever had that same dream as him, so it didn't really mean as much to me. But I kind of wanted it to, but it really didn't. But to see the way he talks about it, and it was a really beautiful moment.
Fantastic. Levy, you work with chess. You follow everything chess, and so do you, Hikaru. What does this mean for chess? Is this good for chess that a young Indian player is now the world champion? I'll start with you, Levy.
Certainly. Look, the joke now is, well, are the YouTubers excited to triple their subscriber counts now that Gukesh became the world champion? But that's really not the way I think about it at all. I just think that we've been having conversations about who in the next generation is going to be at the top for so long now, whether it's Gukesh, whether it's Prague, whether it's Nihal, whether it's Arjun Erigaisi, Vincent Keimer, and Nodirbek Abdusattorov, like the list goes on and on. And we got here and we did it. At the middle point of the match, I said that, a superstar gets to the stage and has to succeed. Like, it's really difficult to then try to do it a second time if you fail the first time. And chess moves aside and like blunders aside, Gukesh is the world champion. And that is a massive, massive deal, because now the entire world is going to watch chess a whole lot more closely than they might have been over the last 4 years. And in India in particular. So I'm super excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I think I would pretty much add to what Levy was saying. I think certainly it's very heartwarming to see the amount of interest and support for chess in India. I think actually speaking from my own background, growing up in the US, it's one thing that like actually feels like kind of missing is that there's never been that kind of support for the players or just that general interest in chess as a whole. It's something that I wish had existed when, say, I played in some of the chess Olympiads or, playing in the candidates, or even when Fabiano won the candidates back in, I think it was 2016. You don't have that same interest in the game. And so I actually I would say for me, it's a bit of jealousy, but a little bit of like kind of sadness that when I look at the US that's never been the case here. Because I think for me, when I look at chess, I think it's such a great game that so many people play around the world. And I wish that there would be that same recognition here. But nonetheless, it is fantastic to see the way that the Indians embrace the chess culture, starting with Vishy and Anand, now all the juniors who are rising through the ranks. Obviously, Gukesh winning today. Who knows with Arjun, Nihal, and everybody else. But for chess, it's just absolutely fantastic. And I think before the match, I was rooting for Gukesh to win because I saw much more upside potentially with his victory than if Ding were to win. So I'm very happy overall. And Gukesh and the Indians, they deserve to celebrate. From a nation that you had a couple of IMs back in like the maybe it was only one IM back in like the 50s or 60s. To then having Vishy becoming the first Grand Master, and now you have Vishy becoming world champion. Now you have Gukesh winning. It's just it's a spectacular journey, and I think they should be very proud of what they've accomplished.
What a fairy tale. And the future is definitely bright for chess. And Take has a new feature that is coming out next week, actually, for the CCT finals. It's Guess the Move. This is so exciting, you guys. You can actually guess the moves of the top players while they play. You can join in tournaments. There's a scoreboard. It's very cool. Hikaru, you're going to play this, right?
Yeah, so my intention is to play the game since I'm not playing in the tournament. Obviously, Magnus is playing there. But yeah, it's exciting to see that. I remember when I was very young, when I was a little child, there was this magazine called Chess Life. It's the normal chess publication. And there used to be a column with Guess the Move where you basically try to guess what the moves are from various games. So it's a little bit of throwback and really interested to try it out.
Yeah. Magnus, you won't be able to play Guess the Move because you will be playing the games in the CCT finals. But being a co-founder of Take, and to finally have this feature coming out, are you excited about it?
Yeah, it's very nice. As a kid, I used to play Guess the Move a bunch on ICC, the Internet Chess Club, when there were tough games being broadcasted there. So to get that in the app for a lot more people than back then is a great feature that I'm looking forward to, and I'll certainly use myself when I'm not playing.
Fantastic. And that's not the only thing that's going to happen. So World Rapid and Blitz is only a few weeks away. Magnus Carlsen will be playing as reigning champion. Hikaru is playing Levy. It's happening in your hometown in New York. And Take will be a broadcast partner. We'll have the images from the playing hall, all the action, the clock's ticking down. And we're going to have Levy Rosman in a sofa at the venue talking to Hikaru, talking to Magnus. It's going to be amazing, Levy.
Yeah, talking to them after they play or before they play, not while they play. Although, if they legalized live confession, if it was a confession booth, it would be something. It's the first Rapid and Blitz championship that's either in America or in the US or in North America in general. It's usually somewhere kind of on the eastern part of the world. So I'm pumped and ready to welcome not just these guys, but many other grandmasters to New York City.
Will you go and hang out with Levy in the sofa?
Yeah, of course. At least if I play some decent games, and I think in the future we should try and hook up with Neuralink so that we can have live confessions without the people moving from their chairs. I think that is
that'd be nice.
The eventual, if not end goal, then something for us. But I think that is going to be great. We tried the confession booth back in 2015 for the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, and there were a couple of epic moments like Russian Grandmaster Antipov, who people should go check that out, who had a little bit of a funny appearance there. So I think that's going to be great. 5 days of Rapid and Blitz chess, there will be tons of things to rant about. So I hope you will have a sympathetic ear for us there, Levy.
You're going to be a shrink there, Levy.
Well, it'll be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Hikaru, you're going to try to steal those 2 titles away from the guy next to you here.
Well, I mean, I think for me, it's been a long time since I lived in New York, but I did also grow up in New York, just outside of the city. So it's kind of like going home on one hand. And I think, you know, I've played many strong tournaments in the United States, but I don't believe I've ever played any. I mean, I've played strong events, but not like elite events in New York City. And having that opportunity to sort of play there after having played nearly a whole career in many different places, it's just really special to be there, and really looking forward to the event. I think it should be great. Also, one last thing. I think, Levy, there was, I think, a World Rapid and Blitz, or maybe it was a World Blitz Championship all the way back. I'm going to say it was like 88 or 89, I think, in St. John's in Canada, which Gary played. I think Tal might have played there as well. So it's not the first time, I don't think, but it's been a long time at any rate.
It's about time.
It was first in US, yeah?
Okay, yeah. First in the US, yeah.
Yeah, first in US, yeah. I
Even
Canada,
though
St.
Trump
John,
wants to make Canada the 51st state. It's not quite yet.
Yes. They'll be big. They'll be big state. Maybe we'll cut them up into 5 states.
Probably
55 states.
Yeah. Awesome, you guys. Very fun. We're going to start wrapping up, but I have to ask you a final question. About the World Championship match 2024, what will you remember from this match, Magnus?
I will say that in the last match, I think Gukesh won the match by a king move, and he is now the king of the World Championship. So I think in terms of MVP for the last game, his king is the MVP. And unfortunately, Ding's bishop in the corner will be the other one. But I think it was overall quite a memorable World Championship. Lots of interesting moments. I think Ding had a very real chance to win it. So in terms of that, it was a success, since it was a very interesting sporting contest. I think we will remember sort of the implications of Gukesh winning more than the final game. But you know, we could look back in history and see this as a pivotal moment in chess. It could also not be, but it's potentially the start of something very interesting.
Yeah. Hikaru, what will you remember?
Yeah, I think ultimately the match was a very close contest. Both players had their moments when they were great. There were moments when they weren't great either. But the fact that it was such a great competitive match is mostly what I will take away. I think, as Magnus says, you know, ultimately the margins are very fine. This could be something where we look back and this sort of the changing of the guard, or you know, start of the Indians dominating chess perhaps for the next decade or two, or remains to be seen, obviously. Whereas, you know, if Ding had played a little bit differently in this last game, maybe he gets winning chance and he retains the title. Whereas now, unfortunately, we're probably, at least in my opinion, I think this is the last time we're going to see Ding on, you know, playing in the absolute top level events. And so it's kind of sad to think that his career potentially ends with this huge blunder, putting the bishop in the corner. But ultimately, the fact that it was a great match, I think the fans enjoyed it. The fans won, and that's really, to me at least, what I think matters the most.
I don't have too much more to add. The emotions were special to see. You know, biting your lip because you're smiling at the board because you know you're about to win the world championship, and then crying, and then you're pumping, and the hug with his father outside. It was really nice. It was really special, and now we just have to find him a pool, and I'm sure there's plenty in Singapore, and I'm sure he will be able to jump into one.
Special moment in your career, Magnus.
Yeah, not that pool though, right? You remember before the World Championship, Levy? The Magnus post.
What? Oh, yeah.
Love it. Maybe there will be a pool. I asked Levy and Magnus in Paris 2 months, 3 months even before the match, will we see tears? And Magnus, I remember you answered, well, I hope it's going to be happy tears.
Wow.
You predicted it.
Yeah, that's I think a nice way to finish.
Yeah. We did see happy tears in Singapore. Gukesh is the 18th and youngest World Chess Champion in history. Thank you so much to Magnus, Levy, and Hikaru for doing this post-game show for Take, Take, Take. It's fantastic for the fans to get to hear their insight to the games and the minds of these fantastic players. Thank you to all of you for following during the World Chess Championship match. Remember to download the Take, Take, Take app because there is a lot more action coming very shortly. So to all of you, we hope you have enjoyed the past couple of weeks and we'll see you again shortly. Thank you for watching.